All right. Hello, everyone. We are live. Thank you for joining us today. Our webinar today is about applying to internship, and we'll talk more about what that is. My name is Robina Onwonga. I am the Association of Black Psychologists Student Circle Communications Chair, and I'll just be moderating the conversation for today. I will start off by introducing our guests. Our first guest is Janelle Dixon. She is a fourth-year clinical psychology doctoral student at Wright State University in Dayton, Ohio. She received her Bachelor's of Arts degree in psychology and a minor in health sciences from the George Washington University in 2010. In 2012, she completed a Master of Marriage and Family Therapy at the University of Southern California. And her research interests during her tenure at Wright State University have included forensic assessment and intervention and issues in the legal system related to minorities, women, and individuals of low socioeconomic status. Janelle has been an active member of the Association of Black Psychologists and has served as a Midwestern graduate rep for 2 years. Janelle will complete her clinical psychology doctoral internship at the Federal Correctional Complex, or FCC, in Butner, North Carolina. And her career objective is to work as a board certified forensic psychologist. She aspires to provide psychological evaluation for the adult criminal court system, expert witness testimony, and consultation. And she defended her dissertation yesterday.
Woo! Thank you, everyone. Hello.
Next, we'll have Ericka Ramirez-Solis. She is a fifth-year clinical psychology PhD student at California School of Professional Psychology in Los Angeles. She obtained a bachelor's degree in psychology at California State Polytechnic University, Pomona, and her master's in clinical psychology at California School of Professional Psychology. Currently, she's completing a practicum in the neuropsychology department at Harbor UCLA Medical Center and will be starting her internship at the Southern Arizona VA this August. And she defended her dissertation last month.
Hi, everyone.
Thanks for joining us, Ericka. Next, we have Dr. Thomas Vance. He's a clinical and research postdoctoral fellow at Columbia University Medical Center with the Columbia Gender Identity Program and Gender Identity Program and the Program for the Study of LGBT Health at the New York State Psychiatric Institute at Columbia University. Dr. Vance received his Ph.D. in counseling psychology from the University of Akron in 2018 and completed his pre-doctoral internship at Boston University School of Medicine, specifically with the Center for Multicultural Training in Psychology. His clinical practice uses evidence-based therapies and techniques appropriately modified for working cross-culturally with socially, economically, and politically disadvantaged clients. Dr. Vance's current research examines the intersection of sexual orientation, gender identity, race, ethnicity, disability, class, and other identities and experiences. Thanks for joining us, Dr. Vance.
Of course.
And then last, we have Dr. Suzette Speight. She is an associate professor of psychology and the director of clinical training for the counseling psychology doctoral program at the University of Akron in Akron, Ohio. She joined the faculty at University of Akron in 2008. She received her doctorate in counseling psychology from The Ohio State University in 1990, and she's a licensed psychologist and is affiliated with the Minority Behavioral Health Group in Akron, Ohio. Her research and scholarly interests include the psychological effects of oppression, mental health, and African American women, African-centered psychology, cultural competence, and social justice in psychology. Thanks for joining us, Dr. Speight. So we'll have Dr. Speight start us off with just explaining to our listeners what internship is, particularly for some of our undergrads who may have questions about what internship is and and then we'll go from there. So Dr. Speight, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and take it away.
All right. Now I'm unmuted.
Yes.
So hello, everyone. I'm going to also set my timer so I don't talk too long. I just want to give an overview so that we all start from the same spot in understanding what internship is and where it fits into your program and all that. So one of the things to note is that the internship is supposed to be this culminating experience of that puts together all of your prior clinical work all together in this capstone experience. And so because of that, your pre-doctoral internship happens later in your doctoral program. So you might do 3 years or 4 years even of clinical, what we call practicum, right? Field experience at your school, in the community that your school is located. And then when you're working on your dissertation or as you finish your dissertation, then that's when you would start looking and searching for a pre-doctoral internship. And that's a 12-month full-time job. Basically, that's very clinically oriented. Some have emphasis on research and science. Some emphasize assessment more, therapy more, depending on populations that you want to work with. But again, it's this full-time job where it's your last opportunity, one of your last opportunities to get a lot of supervision and more training. So one way to think about internship is it's a chance to fill any gaps in your training, that maybe things you wanted to learn that you didn't get to learn yet, or things that you liked a lot and now want to go into more depth, things that you want to specialize in. So if you're interested in trauma or assessment or forensic work or eating disorders, let's say, if you want to specialize in that, then the internship provides you an opportunity to find a site, for instance, that does a lot of work with eating disorders. So one of the unique things about the internship process is that it is driven, or should be driven, by your actual interest and training goals. So that you should be looking for sites that are going to give you the types of experiences that you want, that are going to be have the type of supervisors that you want, that can teach you what you want to learn, have the type of population that you want to work with. If you want to work with veterans, if you want to work with children, if you want to work with young adults, you would then look for an internship that can give you the type of experiences that you really desire. So an internship becomes then a very personal training opportunity that should be driven by your own interests. And so I'll just make a couple more points. One of the most important things is it's a matching process. And many of you already know what that means, but in a nutshell, it means that your intention is to match, is to find a site that likes you and you like them, and that y'all match. And so it happens through fancy computer algorithms and all that. But one of the key things in matching is to be clear on who you are and what you're looking for in your internship year, so that you can then present yourself to a site saying, hey, I know that y'all offer these 3 things. Coincidentally, I happen to be interested in these 3 things. That's what makes you a good match. If you're wanting things that they don't do, you don't match. And so this is really important. And it's so basic, but it bears saying again, so that if you want to work with a veterans population, you probably should already have some experience with either substance abuse or trauma or severe mental illness or assessment, for instance, or maybe group therapy. if you have that sort of experience in your background, you're going to be a good match for a VA. If you don't have that type of experience, and let's say your experience is working with women with eating disorders, and you don't have very much assessment experience, a VA is not going to be that interested in you. And that's fine, because counseling centers would be. So the key to matching is to be really clear on what it is you want to learn. And this means thinking about your training goals, and also being able to understand how your prior experiences fit together to then develop a narrative, I guess for lack of a better word, or a story about, well, I wanted to learn about adults. And so I did a year here, a year here, a year here. Now I'm ready to apply to you at this outpatient hospital-based clinic. So the idea of matching is have a realistic appraisal of how well your prior clinical experiences match with what the site does and what they would be looking for. So I think that's my quick overview of how the internship works in your program, that it's this capstone culminating experience, and that what is key is to think about your own experience, picking sites that are consistent with your background so that you can tailor your application to see, these are the 3 things I want. These are the 3 things you offer. I think I'd be a great match. So I'll stop there. And we have folks who have matching experience that they can share.
Thank you, Dr. Speight, for giving us that rundown of what it is and just helping everybody to have some context about that. So next I'll turn it over to Vance to give some of his experience, and then I'll do the same with Janelle and Ericka. And then from there, I'll toss out some questions that students generally ask and have them respond to that. So Dr. Vance, you can go ahead and.
Great. Oh, so again, thanks so much for having me to talk with everyone. Hello, YouTube land. Hello, ABSI, and everybody who is watching and listening. So my experience is, I guess, is a unique experience. I remember when I was going through this whole process that I wasn't fully too sure exactly which area I really wanted to go into. A lot of sites you might find counseling centers, VAs, hospitals, community mental health agencies. And for me, I wanted to just cast my net wide. So I applied to college counseling centers, VAs, hospitals, and from other perspectives, it's probably not the best way to do it. But for me personally, I really wanted to figure out, what type of experience would resonate the most with me. And the experience I was really looking for is a place that is really high with social justice and multicultural emphasis, a site that's going to push me beyond the areas that I learned in graduate school. And with that process, I just applied to 15 different places, majority college counseling centers, roughly about 12. Mainly because my background came from college counseling centers and community mental health agencies, is where I did my practicums. And I started off with your essays. Luckily, with our program at Akron, we were able to write 2 of our essays in our class and had multiple eyes on them. I think our essays are extremely important to start early and not at the last minute, because you really, really want to convey your authentic self. Something that was very, very important. I think when you're looking for internship, you're trying to figure out what do you value and how can you be your authentic self in the context of psychology. And for me, I really wanted to push and highlight my authentic self in areas that maybe I don't have enough experience in. With that, it led me to 10 different interviews, 7 college counseling centers, 1 VA, and the hospital. Well, maybe that's 9. 8, 8 college counseling centers, 1 VA, and 1 hospital. And how I came with my process was I made my own list of what I thought I would like. And a lot of them was all college counseling centers. And lastly on my list was this hospital in Boston. And for me, I'm really a Philly type of person. So when I went to a site, I really want to figure out, if this could be the environment that would help me grow, that would be supportive, that I can be my authentic self, that I can learn in areas that maybe I haven't experienced so much. And I went to the site, and that's how I was able to make my decisions. Ironically, Boston, my site, the Center for Multicultural Training and Psychology, CMTP, uh, caught me off guard. I never thought I would be at a hospital setting. I never thought that I would like a hospital setting because I never had that experiences in graduate school. And once I got there, it felt like home. There was something in my gut that was just like, this fits. I had the right environment, the right training director, the right faculty that was very, very supportive, that would let me be my authentic self, but it also pushed me in different areas. With my psych consortium, I had different kind of tracks that I had to do throughout the whole year. So one track, I used my community mental health background with severe and persistent mentally ill population. And in another site, I chose actually a school-based site, and they actually switched that site out for me and put me with the Center for Transgender Medicine and Surgery, which I had zero experience in working with that specific population. But looking at my whole CV, they knew that that could be an area that I could really grow and foster. And it seemed once I got there, they knew the right answer. I ranked them number one, and I matched there. And with that, it was this a really a clear, good match. It's really all about a match. You don't want to go to places just because of a name or just because a location, but what do you find yourself that you're going to grow the most? This is the last bit of graduate training that's really going to kind of, fine tune those areas that you can really grow even further into your career. And so really figure out what type of emerging psychologist do you want to be? This is another area, clinical area, where you can really foster those skills, really grow, and really push yourself. It's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult. Moving is a lot and it's expensive. But at the end of the internship, it's very, very worth it. And you're going to discover a new you. And my new me was discovering that I really enjoy being in a hospital setting, which led to my postdoc in another hospital. And I would never ever gotten that experience if I didn't just leap out on faith and apply to a site that maybe I thought that maybe I wasn't a great fit. So I'm sure that's probably all over the place. But one area is just mainly just be your authentic self, figure out your values, and where do you really want to see yourself and how you're going to grow.
Thanks, Vance. I wrote down some key points of what you said that I think we'll end up coming back to as people have questions, and then just like highlights of what the internship experience is. So thank you so much for sharing your story and being open to, letting others hear about that.
Yeah, of course.
So we'll go with either Janelle or Ericka, whoever wants to go first. Let me put you up, Janelle.
Okay. Okay. Hi. Vance, I think you said that very well. That really resonated with me when you mentioned being your authentic self, because that's something that I definitely observed during my time, during internship interviews, and something that I was really cognizant of when I was writing my essays. So thank you for that. So the internship interview process, it is overwhelming. It's timely, it's expensive, but it's also very fun. And I really appreciated the experience because it was an experience for me to be able to grow, to identify where are the areas where I want to grow as a future psychologist, as a clinician, and then also noting what my strengths were too. So starting from the beginning, I was really interested in looking at sites that focused on forensic assessment. As Robina previously mentioned, my career objective is to become a forensic psychologist whose specifies in forensic assessment. So that was something that I was definitely honing in on. I applied to mostly federal prisons, state hospitals, and some consortiums. When it came down to it, I applied to 15 sites and I received 13 interviews, which, to be honest, was actually a little overwhelming, especially when it came to travel and figuring out interviews and scheduling. But I ended up going to the variety of sites across the country, as far west as Los Angeles, as far north as Boston, and then as far south as Fort Worth, Dallas, Texas area. And when it really came down to it, it was what stood out for me the most was what were the sites where I really felt like, as Vance said, like home. What were the sites where I thought that I was going to get the best training possible for my year, the sites that provided the things that I was particularly looking for, which was forensic assessment, expert witness testimony training, as well as the ability to evaluate and to treat sex offenders. And luckily for my site, which is at FCC Butner, that they offer all of that and more. When I got to Butner, it was an amazing experience. I really appreciated the staff there, the training director, all of the other interns were really helpful with providing feedback about the site. And that was something that I noticed too, that during my journey, it was really important to talk to the current interns at the sites to see how happy they were with the sites, if the site was actually meeting their training objectives. So that was something that was really important to me. And Butner seemed to be matching that for the current interns and then also for what my objectives were. When it came down to the actual matching process and ranking, it was a little difficult as far as ranking my top 5 to 10 sites. So one of the suggestions that I have that you would do throughout the process is to write down what are the pros and cons of the sites. What do you like? What do you not like? Just overall taking a second after each interview to really just feel like, what am I feeling? Like, how did this site make me feel? Did I enjoy this process? Could I see myself working here as an intern? So those are all really great things to take into consideration. And when it came down to it, I made my list and I made Butner my first choice. I was fortunate enough to match at Butner. And it was overall a draining but great experience. I also agree with Vance. I think it's really important that you start the essays and the cover letters as soon as possible. I would probably maybe say early as summertime. I unfortunately did not do that. I waited until the fall, so it was a little bit more stressful. So if you can start even as early as August, that would probably put you in a really good space where you can get the opportunity to have your essays and your cover letters reviewed multiple times. Because you will, once you're starting to write multiple essays and or at least cover letters, you'll notice mistakes and things of that nature. So it's really helpful if you have people to review them. And then also, as far as preparing for the actual interview, I had the opportunity, thanks to my school and specifically the African American Women in Professional Psychology organization at Wright State. We had mock interviews through them. So that was really helpful to help me prepare. Also, my school provided mock interviews as well. So those were two different situations that I had the opportunity to kind of get that nervousness out and to be able to figure out, you know, what does my presentation look like? Am I actually answering the questions correctly? And finding out all of those other little idiosyncrasies that we all have. And yeah, so those are, for the most part, some of my general tips and feedback about my experience on internship.
Am muted. Thank you, Janelle. That's really helpful for us to hear your experience as well. And probably we'll have some questions that you can answer based off of your experience. Ericka, you're up next. go ahead and unmute yourself and take it away.
Hi, everyone. So for me, at the beginning of graduate school, I already knew that I wanted to be at a VA. So I kind of prepared myself as far as coursework was concerned, as well as when it was time to pick practicum sites. Just like Dr. Suzette said, I picked sites that would make me um, appealing to the VA. I worked at a substance abuse site, outpatient community substance abuse. I also worked at a residential treatment program for individuals who were preparing to reintegrate themselves into society, because I knew that that was something that veterans definitely had to do once they left the military. And also, like Robina said, I'm at Harbor UCLA right now learning and doing assessments, because you absolutely need assessment hours if you plan to work at a VA site. As far as the process preparing to apply, yes, Janelle, it is a very tedious process. And first of all, you have to know what it is that you want to learn. I knew that I wanted to work with trauma. I knew that I wanted to learn how to deal with diverse populations. My goal is to be able to work in any setting with any person. So I wanted to find a site that would give me that opportunity to learn how to deal with trauma, as well as learn how to deal with multiple ethnic populations. So that was on the top of my list. Every site that I decided to apply to, I made sure that I thoroughly combed their websites to see what it is that was appealing to me. Also, type of experience I had that would be good for them. Like, I'm good for you, but are you good for me too? And also, as far as essays are concerned, I got a lot of help from a lot of people. It took me hours and hours just to write one cover letter, because I went through each site um, to make sure that that's where I wanted to go. Just like Janelle, I'm in California, and I apply all over as far as Hawaii and Mississippi. So I didn't want to limit myself, and also it was encouraged by our school that we throw out our net wide. I also applied to hospitals, VAs, college counseling centers, and community mental health. These are the locations that I feel like the experience that I have now would be beneficial. And these are also areas where I feel like I would have been able to learn how to work with the populations that I wanted to work with, related to trauma and domestic violence and things of that sort. So it's very important to understand what it is that you want to learn, and that those sites, like Janelle, that those sites are going to give you that, because this is like really setting you up for your career. Also, just like Janelle said, I did a lot of mock interviews, and I did a lot of mock interviews with different types of individuals. And I tried to make it as close to the way that it would have been if I were in the situation. So I had people throw out questions to me that I would have never thought about answering, so that I could prepare myself. I also had conversations with people after their interviews. What did they ask you? How did you answer? How did other people answer? So that I could just prepare myself. It's a first time experience. You don't know what's going to happen. So any feedback from anybody is going to be beneficial for you. So these are some things that I think are like very important when going through the process.
Thanks for sharing, Ericka. So I will start off by reading some of the questions that we as a board kind of came up with based on common questions that students may have. And then I'll also be taking some questions that are in the chat that are coming up. So can you talk a little bit? So a few of you mentioned essays and, trying to do that on time and that being a big component of it. So can you speak a little bit about your essay writing process and how many revisions your essay needed, just what that looked like for you? Anyone can kind of jump in on that.
So for me, I started with our program, we started in the spring of that fall.
So your
And I
your
think that,
class,
you said what?
sorry, your program had a class for it?
No, we didn't have a class for it. It was part of our assignment to write 2 of the essays, and then the rest was on your own. And with that type of process, for me, and I think it's important for us to also, remain African centered, is to also look upon the students who came before you and ask for feedback and ask for guidance. And that was one thing that I did, is look up to older students who were either on an internship already or who were about to go to an internship, and really ask them, what were some things and some advice that I should keep in mind in writing an essay. And overall, a lot of their experience was all about being your authentic self. And so with that, I did my own draft of all my essays and nitpick and did it to the best of my abilities, and then also had other eyes on it and give me hard critical feedback, which is sometimes it's hard because when you write your essays and you're putting your authentic self out there, you also have to remember that it's partially vulnerability that you're putting out there. You're hoping that these sites will see the value in what you're producing. And when you pass that to your readers, or pass it to somebody who has been there, done that, and they give hard critical feedback, remember that it's all to make you even better and not to tear you down and not to try to make you feel bad. So I think it's first identify, who are some of the senior members ahead of you who already been there, who can give you some guidance. But also don't set yourself up and wait till the last minute, because sometimes when we wait till the last minute, we rush things. Sometimes we overlook, major characteristics that really make you great. And by rushing that process, it makes us overlook some of the key elements that might be a great fit for a site that we didn't take time to actually comb out. So I would suggest starting months in advance, actually. One of the first things that you should do is, in my opinion, in my experience, would be their cover letters and essays, because those areas are going to be the first things that sites actually read. A lot of feedback that I got from my sites that I interviewed, what made me stand out, were my essays. They liked that I was myself. I even wrote about practicing the African Center psychology, which I was a little hesitant about writing that because I wasn't too sure how these internship sites would respond to that. But again, it was really, really important to me to stay grounded, stay rooted in my own philosophies, because we are the emerging psychologists of the future in the field. So we want to make sure we convey us into these sites and also figure out how we can benefit from these sites. So we don't want to just present like we know it all, but also, what can we gain? It should be a mutual transaction.
Yeah. What does anybody else want to speak to that question, or we can move on to a different one? Okay. What are some things that you all wish that you knew during your application and or interview process?
I guess I'll keep talking. I already knew that it's going to cost a lot, but I wish I would have actually sat with it and actually realized how much it's going to cost. That's one thing that I didn't listen from the older students. They said it's really going to cost you. I'm like, oh yeah, yeah, it's really going to cost you a lot. But no, this is a whole, the struggle is real. And so what I did is schedule all my interviews on the East Coast that I could drive to. It was a big, big road trip for me, which has pros and cons to that. So the pros is you save lots of money. Luckily, I had lots of friends on the East Coast, so I was, couch surfing throughout the East Coast from Virginia all the way up to Boston. And then on the other side, sometimes having back-to-back interviews, it's overwhelming, it's tiring. And sometimes you forget what site are you actually at and trying to orient yourself. So pay attention to the site that you're at. And then also, I kind of wish that, I just wish I would have just spread them out instead of packing them all in like 1 week, 1 to 2 weeks. So save your funds now in undergrad.
Wait for someone.
Literally though, save your funds because let me tell you. But no, I had over 10 interviews, and although that sounds really wonderful, and I had an immense amount of like gratitude for all the interviews that I received, something that I wish someone had told me in advance was to not attempt to go on every single interview. I wish I would have done maybe 8 to 10 when it came down to it. So I physically went to 12 of my interviews, and then I did one conference call for my interview. And like Vance just said, it's exhausting. My interviews, though, they spanned a little bit more. So I had one interview in December, and then my last interview was actually the first week of February, but most of them were 2 to 3 weeks in January. And some weeks I had 2 interviews, and I think 1 week I had 3 interviews in 2 different cities. And it's very difficult. So definitely try to space them out when you can. Although unfortunately, once you actually start to get the interview, it's hard to actually do that because they also are expecting you to respond to them in a very timely manner. And yes, try to save money, try to link up with as many people as you know in the various cities. I think that's something that definitely helped save me a little bit of money because most of the states that I applied to were places where I could see myself potentially long-term because I had family or friends there. So I had the opportunity to stay with some friends and family, but there were still some situations where I had to stay at a hotel. And even then, most of the places that I went to, I flew to. And so, yeah, you can go into the thousands of dollars.
I think for me, the biggest thing is understanding that if you don't get any interviews, don't panic. My first round, I had to go into second rounds. My first round, I applied to 25 places and I only got 2 interviews and they didn't pick me. And so I had to go into second rounds. You have almost a year to prepare for first rounds. We started in the spring, like at Vance's school. So I had the whole summer to write essays and do everything. But when you go into second rounds, you literally have 5 days. And I got that wrong. I applied to 14 places, first rounds. I applied to 25 places, second rounds. So I had 5 days to apply to 25 places. That's new essays, well, not new essays, because your first 4, I don't know if anybody said this, but you have 4 general essays that you have to write: autobiography, essay on your theoretical orientation, an essay on, if I can remember right, and maybe somebody can chime in, a diversity essay, and something else, another essay. It's 4 essays that you're going to give to all of your sites. So those essays have to be written so that you can portray yourself in a manner that will be appealing to wherever you apply. And then the cover letters are going to be the ones that you are going to make specifically for each site. I had to do 25 different cover letters in 5 days. So that took a long time, but I actually got more and got 4 interviews that second round. And it was actually places that I really wanted to be at. So even if you don't get interviews, don't panic. Just do what you need to do. Keep pushing and eventually you will get to where you need to be. So
Something else that I just thought about, something that I wish that maybe could have been drilled more into me was not to be so intimidated by other applicants when you get to your sites. When you start interviewing at different sites, you're going to encounter lots and lots of people who have a wide variety of different training. Some sound great, some have different experience that maybe you don't have. And if you let that intimidation get inside of you and your mind and like dim your own light, you will bring that into your interviews to the people who actually matter the most. And know that if you get an interview, you know, you deserve that interview, you gained that interview, you earned that interview at the most. If you don't hear anything, you earned that interview, and that you have something that they see, the site see, special inside of you. So something that I would like hope to just remind myself as I was going through that process is not to get intimidated by other people, because other people are going to bring their own talents, but also they're looking at you the same way that you are viewing them. So that's one key point that would just help to remind everyone.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point that you've shared. Thank you. Also, Ericka, thank you for sharing your story as well and just letting people know, that that is something that could happen. And it sounds like it was really overwhelming for you, but you were able to still kind of like do what you needed to do for the next phase, and you ended up somewhere that is a perfect fit for you. Also, so now kind of talking about getting all those interviews, and Janelle mentioned like, oh, it's, it could be amazing, but it's also overwhelming. How, and this is kind of a question that somebody had as well, how do you choose which interviews to accept or go on like in person? And also kind of like to this point where some counseling centers are transitioning to Skype and phone interviews. How do you kind of get a feel for a site if you don't go there in person? And I
Well,
think,
one, check your finances. That is one big telling, and depending on where you're traveling from.
uh
There was a site that I didn't go to the interview. I actually just withdrew, um, ironically here in New York, just because after checking their how much they're going to pay, their stipend, wasn't even enough to survive in New York. And I also just lost that passion for that specific site, knowing that that's not really what I really wanted to go into. I just did it just because I panic. And I would say if you're not really interested, don't even waste your time, because it's going to come across in your interviews that you're not really invested or interested in that particular site.
mhm. That will let that is a good response. What about also Ericka and Janelle, you can speak to this, but Dr. Speight, since you are a clinic intern training director, can you speak a little bit to what students can look for or just keep in mind to kind of get a feel of a site if they don't go in person, or if you have any tips about that? Go ahead and unmute yourself, Dr. Speight. Hey, Dr. Spite, we can't hear you. Thank you. Go
There we
ahead.
go. I was having a hard time with the button.
Oh,
Yeah. So, okay. Anyhow, sorry about that. I think you have to make sure that when you apply, you're only applying to sites you're really serious about. We haven't actually said that. What happens is this costs money. And so I think it's, I don't know, around $500. Correct me if I'm wrong. Around $500. And that gets you between 12 and 15 applications, sites that you can apply to. Over 15, then does it cost $50 each additional application? So right there, you've made some important decisions that you're applying to these 12 to 15 because you're really, really serious. And you're right, like Vance said, and Janelle, I think Janelle said it, that as the process is going on and you have 12 and 13 interviews, it gets a lot. And you may determine while you're in that process, yeah, these last couple, I think I'd rather not go. Why waste their time? Don't waste my time. I've had 10 great interviews. I'm sure I'll match at one of those 10 sites. I don't need to do these last two. But I think it's a key question of how will you get the feel for a site if you don't go? What's happening with counseling centers is I think they're trying to even out the disparities, of people that are traveling from California to Indiana and how much money that costs and that it's expensive. And so that's why I think they're moving to Skype interviews to even that out for people. And so you still have to figure out a way to determine what's it feel like there, right? What's the atmosphere? And so I think talking to the interns is really, really helpful. The current interns, don't forget, even if you talk to them on the phone on a Friday at 6 p.m., it's still an interview. Don't make that mistake of thinking, oh, we're casual and it's cool. And no, it's still an interview. Believe that. They're still evaluating you. But I think as you talk to interns and realize, I sort of like these people, or, oh my goodness, I wouldn't want to cross the street with these people. I think that gives you a feel for what it might be like to be there. So you have to use your good intuition, I think, if you can't physically get to a site, to make that determination of what it would be like to be there. Listen to how people talk about each other, about how they talk about their work, how they talk about their work day. Like, what's a typical work day? Are they working every night till 8 p.m. and getting in at 7:30? That's interesting. That might not be what you want to do. So I think trying to gain some insight into what it would be like to live at that site is what's really important.
For me, for second rounds, it's all Skype interviews or telephone interviews. So I had a lot of, when they had that question, do you have any questions for us? I had a lot of questions, not even just about the site, about the area where the site was located, about the type of interns that they're interested in, what they thought was beneficial, and also just everything that I can think of, I asked them. And I also talked to interns as well and got a lot of insight. I talked to current interns. I talked to past interns. I talked to professors. I talked to anybody that would talk to me at that site. I wanted to get all the information that I could. Anybody that was willing to talk to me, I talked to them. Don't be intimidated by people. Just have conversations.
And keep in mind about that stipend. And I'm bringing it back to the money. You're working for a year, roughly between $25,000 to $30,000 a year. And depending on the city or wherever you're living in, i.e., Boston, you're going to have to do something strange for a piece of change. It is not an easy process to make it. And so I would also, suggest that you keep that in mind as well. Can I actually afford to live in a New York or a Boston or a San Francisco? Because those places, even though the site might be great, but currently at the system right now with APA, it's not really equitable across the board. Certain sites that I know in more rural states make 40 plus. And I was like, wow, that's fascinating that you can make a 40 plus in one state, but in a more expensive city, you don't make that much at all. And ask specifically the interns, how do you make $25,000 work in a year in a big city like New York, with rent and cars and bills, and ask them some of the suggestions that they do. And also, I looked at if they were tired. If interns had a full attitude when I saw them, I took note of that because, I don't want to go into a place with it's only January and 5 months in, the interns have attitudes already, not even finished half a year yet. Because that is telling of how much they're overworked or maybe unappreciated or what that culture of that environment is. And also, I was looking to see who is around. How diverse are these sites that I'm applying to? I asked one site, tell me about your diversity, and they only talked about race, but they forgot about age, and they talked about sexuality, they forgot about ableism, and that let me know something about how they see diversity and what they calling diversity, and if that would be a good fit for me to continue growing in this area.
And think about if it's a place where you're going to be there for a year. Is this a place where you can live for a year? I asked one question of one person. Actually, she was the main person. And she was like, we have a Circle K and a Walmart. And if you want to do anything else, you're going to have to drive about 2 hours out. And I was like, okay, that's
Mm,
probably not a place for me. So keep that in mind too. Is it a place where you can live for a year?
and possibly longer. I think it's important to
Mhm,
also explore postdoc opportunities.
mhm.
Now in the field of psychology is moving forward to kind of encouraging people to start doing more formal postdocs. And a lot of these internship sites keep on their interns to the postdoc level to continue your hours to gain for licensure. And that might be something that you might want to explore. Is does the site offer a postdoc after, or where does your interns tend to end after internship?
And Vance, you kind of touched on something that someone in the chat asked. So about how these places talk about diversity. Who do you see represented there? How do they? How does it feel for you to be there? Kind of like Janelle was saying earlier. Like, how did you feel after you left that site? So I'm wondering, how do you think that your race impacted both your application and your interview process? So this staying true to yourself and being your authentic self, but writing those
Yeah.
essays and also being in those spaces.
Yeah. So that was a really eye-opening experience for me. Once again, I applied to mostly sites that offered, forensic or correctional experience, and I was usually the only person of color at all of the interviews. There were only maybe 2 or 3 sites where there were more than one individual of color. But mostly it was just me. And so that was something else that I really realized throughout the journey, that sometimes it can feel almost a little lonely too, because you're going on these interviews and you're going in very white spaces, at least the places where I applied, and being the only person of color. So that was something that I really honed in on during my interviews. Not only asking questions about diversity, asking how diversity is actually being implemented. Do they have committees, diversity committees? Also, too, being very cognizant of the individuals that work there. What do the interns look like? Even staff. What does the staff look like? And there are even situations where I wasn't able to talk to diverse interns, but I talked to the staff and I asked them questions, because that's just the type of person I am in general. So I'm always, I'm going to talk to the training director, and I'm also going to talk to the janitor to see how everyone's experience is. And there were even some sites that I will not name, but were very less than pleasant, I think, for people of color. So, and of course, I felt that kind of straight off the bat. And I, of course, immediately put them to the bottom of my matching list. So I think it's definitely something you have to take into consideration, because although you will be there for only a year can be very, very long, and you want to feel comfortable in that space. So although it's important to interview with the training directors and all of the other clinicians there, I think talking to other people like the trainees, the interns, or other staff members is really important too.
Hi, I would add that you can use diversity as a criteria for yourself. Meaning when you're searching on the website, you can decide, this is really important to me. I want diverse staff, meaning, diverse supervisors. I want there to be a diverse population. I want there to be a diversity training program. That's not the basics, but is more advanced. And so you can use these things as criteria and decide to not apply to places that don't meet your criteria. I mean, you're allowed to have your own personal criteria. I don't think we've actually said it that way. We have talked about that you've got to develop your own training goals and be your authentic self and look for your own values to be replicated at the site. But you also might have criteria that are deal breakers. Like if there's not Black supervisors, maybe I don't want to go there. Like you can say that and you can decide that, and you can decide not to apply to places because they don't do a good enough job with diversity and they're not going to help you grow. Remember, that's the point of it. It's not just for you to go there and work and get hours. It's also for you to train and grow. And if the site is not talking about diversity in 2019 and you're African descent, I don't know why you'd go, because there's so many choices. There's many other places. So feeling comfortable is important. Knowing that you cannot apply to places is important. You can strike places out because racism is real still. And so you'll feel it if you walk into a site and they're not used to, Black doctors. They're just used to Black clients who they treat, as second-class citizens. That's not a place you probably should have even applied to. So that's what I would say.
Yeah. And to continue, I would say look at the applicants. Who are they attracted to the site? Are they attracting applicants that look adjacent to you? One site, and I'm going to do a shameless plug to the Center for Multicultural Training and Psychology in Boston. It felt great to walk in and seeing 2 Black men, 1 Black woman, a Latina woman, and a wide variety of applicants that looked like me and looked adjacent to me, i.e. our brown brothers and sisters out there. My whole cohort were people of color, all 6 of us. Everybody, all my faculty were some people of color except one, which is really, really rare for an internship site. It is like a utopia. But I would first look at who are they attracting? And a question that I would give to YouTube land and everybody that I asked all my site was, what attracted you to my application? And I listened really closely because I really valued, did they really take time to get to know me? Or are they just trying to check in a quota box? And certain sites might say, oh, you attend the HBCU, right? And I was like, no. I didn't attend that. And just because they read African Center, they just lumped me into another school. And that meant something to me. I think I want to be in a space that is respectful and valued and taking the time to really invest in their interns. And when I went to Boston, they were able to quote things that I forgot that I wrote about and say, specifically, we like that you work with children and we like that you was African-centered. Tell me more about that and how do you learn that? And that tells you more about a site of how invested they are into racial diversity specifically.
Yeah, I want to piggyback on that because you took that right out of my brain. I was thinking the same thing. Like, did they really read my essay? Like, are you interested in what it is that I want to know? Did you really read the essay? Like, I had people that can literally quote things out of my essay and just comment on people that I discussed and people that I knew, like giving me a feeling that you're really interested in what it is that I had to say and what I'm interested in learning, and that you're interested in providing me with the training that I'm interested in obtaining.
Thank you. And as we're continuing, if you think of any other major points that you all could share that the students should ask, you can feel free to share that as well, because I think that's a really good one to ask, because you're trying to figure out if they are also a good fit for you, like you're interviewing them as well.
Well, for me, I have a family. I have 3 children. And so I had to take that into consideration as well. Like, what am I going to do with my children? I have decided that they're going to stay in California and I'm moving to Arizona because it's not that far away and I could just hop on a plane and come back. But I didn't want to uproot them from their lives. But when applying, I was thinking, is this a child-friendly place? Are there good school systems? Like, is this a place where I can take my family? Is it worth taking my family? So those are things to consider as well if you're going into this process with children. what are you gonna do with them? Because you're gonna I've heard that you're gonna work a lot. So what are you gonna do with those children, and how can you make the experience also beneficial for them if you decide that your whole family is gonna be uprooted?
Yeah, definitely. So during this process, did you all have some sort of system of keeping track of the interviews that you got, or the essays that you wrote, the cover letters, ticket prices, all those things, so that stuff was organized and that you were just able to keep track of everything?
Yeah. Oh, you can go ahead.
I created a Excel spreadsheet with everything that I needed: the site name, their email address, their stipend, people that I knew at the site, my contact, if I had a contact. And I went, it started off as a 45 site list, and I, eliminated as I combed through the different sites down to 25 and down to 13. And just made sure that I kept track of everything in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I had an Excel spreadsheet similar to that. And my good friend from my practicum site this year, she's a student at UC, she forwarded me a really helpful ranking list. So of course they're ranking us, so we should be ranking them as well. And the list, and I can definitely get her consent and then also pass it on to you all, I'm sure, as a resource, but it's pretty detailed because it indicates, do they match you as far as training goals? Do they match you for diversity, opportunities, research opportunities? How does it rank as far as just how it made you feel? So your level of comfortableness. Also, it indicated something like, could you see yourself living there? And actually it helped a lot. And so at first I was a little leery, and I'm like, well, how, is this really gonna add up? I feel like they're all gonna like fall into the same place, but no, it really stood pretty true to how I felt about each interview. And my ranking list actually didn't deviate from that much at all. If anything, I probably changed one or two sites just based off of location. But yeah, it worked pretty well. So that was really helpful for me too. And I'll ask her if I can pass on that resource.
Also, you want to think about intervention hours and assessment hours and what they're asking for. And if you meet that criteria, you don't want to apply to places, for the most part, if you're not even meeting what they are asking for, because you're going to be wasting money on that application right off the bat. And some places even say, don't even apply if you're not meeting our criteria.
Yeah, I know for me to keep everything organized, I made a folder for each site with my full application in there, and I color coded based off of interviews or no interviews. So I kept them all very separate. Then I made myself an Excel sheet of what I thought that I liked and ranked them of what I thought before I even went to the sites, and then start moving things up or down depending on after I interviewed and how I felt. And then that is how I made my decision. And my last site, Boston, just took me by surprise, and my plans shifted after I left that site, because originally I just went there, never even heard of that site. I knew that I had a professor who went to that site for internship, and I was like, okay, it might be a good experience, and it really just caught me off guard and really messed up my whole ranking list. And I end up ranking them number one because that's how much of an impression that it had. And I think it's really great to keep monitoring how you feel after you go to these interviews. It might look great on paper, and it might, hit all the spots that you want, that really increases your ranking list. But I think it's really important also to figure out, how do you feel there? Because your environment can really predict how successful you are to really launch forward after internship.
Yeah, I would also echo how important it is to be organized as you go. And so I advise students often to use a folder, or I guess you could do it virtually, but to keep notes on sites as you go, meaning questions you have about the site, things that are confusing about the site that you want to know more about, pros and cons about the site, so that you have that all along, because that's going to help you form the basis of your cover letter. You know, as you're doing your research over the summer, you have to personalize the cover letters. And so all those pros and cons that you and questions you have will help you not only for crafting the cover letter, but also when you interview, you'll say, oh, right, I remember I did have a question about this, that, or the third, because look, I wrote it here in November and here it is January. What did I want to ask them? But you wrote it down. And so being organized in that way, also being organized about your deadlines is important, and being organized with your letter writers so you keep them on track with the deadlines. Because I think one of the things that I don't want people to do is rushing at the last minute, because that's when you make mistakes. There's nothing worse to a site than getting a cover letter that's addressed to not them, that's addressed to somebody else. They're done with you at that point, because you don't, in their mind, they're thinking, well, is this how she's going to write progress notes? Like, she's so careless that she didn't even catch that she sent it to us and we're a different place, right? So you don't want to be in a situation of at the last minute rushing, trying to throw together a cover letter. You want, if you have a bunch of things due on November 1st and then another group due on the 8th, just do them all on the 1st and be done. Otherwise, you're applying for internship will eat up your entire semester, and chances are you probably have a dissertation that you should be working on. So being organized is going to help you finish the task of applying and keep moving forward.
And doing things early. It's very important to do things early, especially asking people to write your letters. You have to give them enough time to really put effort into the letter that they write for you. So do that as early as possible.
Something else in regards to organization is also being organized during the interview process. So for individuals who probably apply to forensic sites, it's a little bit different. I think our interviews are very forensic, so they're very intimidating, and they're intentionally made to be very intimidating, which is a little, it catches you off guard. So for anybody out there who might be applying to such sites, you will be ready for that. But also being prepared and organized as far as knowing what information you put in your materials, so like in your essays or even in your assessment example that you submitted. Because definitely in some of my interviews, they pulled out my assessment and then they would ask questions and ask, why did I pick certain assessments? What would I have done differently? They also asked me about diagnostic questions and things of that nature. I also got a myriad of questions in regards to forensic related topics. So being mindful of that kind of stuff. So it would be helpful to have some of those materials with you while you're on your interviews, maybe just reading them the day before, just to reorient yourself to what you actually said. So that way you're a little bit more prepared on interview day.
One thing that I just thought of earlier when you were mentioning that the different essays, I think that fourth essay, Ericka, is the research essay. So I'm wondering, in this process of us being, well, it's in psychology, the applied fields, being clinicians, but some people also maybe wanting to transition back into academia, how do you figure out what opportunities that there are for research at the different sites, and how much time do you have to do that? If someone could speak to that, or how you found that out during the process, just so that you can kind of keep that going for if you want to do a postdoc or get back in.
Well, I did research at my internship site. I think one question you could ask is there enough time to even do research? And their response is going to say, well, are you done with your dissertation? Because before you're trying to jump with research, you need to finish your dissertation first, before trying to jump the gun and do something extra. But for me, I was able to join a research team at Boston University and really get my hands more into the research side, which ultimately prepared me for a postdoc, specifically looking at research, and where half my time now currently is specifically doing research. And so I think there is opportunities, and my goal eventually is to transition to academia and not so much practice. And I think that is something that I really need to infuse more, knowing that my background didn't really have a heavy emphasis in research components. But I think the first thing, your first research project is your dissertation. So if you want to be a researcher, finish your dissertation first. You know, that's the
That's
best
true.
way to get anything done. Because you know it was great going to internship and just kind of chilling and seeing the rest of the interns panic because they haven't got to a good spot with their dissertation. So they were trying to data collect, and I was having a great time in Boston. I was out just kicking it, and everybody thought I was just on vacation. And you're really going to have a different experience if you get further along with your dissertation. So if you can't stress anything else, you know, first focus on your dissertation. Once that's done, or to a spot where you're just waiting for a date to defend, then you can ask about a research extra, because you're already going to be tired at internship. Internship site is tiring. You're there every single day practicing. It's draining because you're adjusting to a new city or state if you move. All of those components at the same time is a little overwhelming. And then eventually you're going to get in a spot where you're able to do research if that's your goal, and also figure out how to network and navigate in that particular system, which is additional credentialing depending on the university or hospital that you're at. And then also, you know, I would talk more with your supervisors at internship and have a realistic conversations about your future career plans. So luckily for me, I had a lot of supervisions during internship about what are the options or areas that I would like to grow and focus more on. You know, am I looking for more academia tracks? And if so, how can I get myself there? A lot of suggestions for them back then was to focus on licensure. Get licensed first because you'll have more power in that area, which is why I did a clinical and research postdoc to focus on clinical and getting licensed, as well as setting me up for research and publications.
And don't forget, internships internships vary widely in terms of research emphasis. So there are some internships that are going to give you 4 hours a week of protected time to do research, and they're going to expect you to be participating in their grants or their sponsored research programs, because they see themselves as preparing clinical scientists or researchers or academics, right? And so they really integrate or maybe even prioritize research over clinical hours. There's not a lot of places that do that, but there are quite a few highly regarded places that do that. So if that's what you want to do, again, knowing yourself, knowing your goals, and maybe making sure you match with a site that's going to give you a lot of research experience. And there are sites that, you know, I remember having a student who only wanted to do less than 12 clinical contact hours a week. She only wanted to earn 12 hours working with clients per week. She wasn't that interested in therapy. She didn't want to do 40 hours a week of therapy. And she found 15 great places to apply to because they allowed her to do outreach, assessment, intakes, consultations, a whole bunch of other things in her week. Therapy with individual clients was a small part of what she did. So again, you're going to be able to find a site that's going to give you the training opportunities that you want. But it's important to know what you want.
Yeah.
And really going through those sites and seeing what they offer. Because I do want to go into academia. I was looking for sites that offered opportunities to do research. I also, as I was looking at the faculty, what type of research were they doing? Are they doing things that I was interested in? Was there a possibility that we could do some kind of collaboration on research? Are there already research projects in place that I can jump on? Those were like some of the things that I was paying attention to as I was going through each site. And then during the interview process, I asked, do we have room to do research and things like that? Like, how do you guys feel about that?
Thank you. I feel like there's just so much to know, keep in mind that this could be a whole part two, or have a whole part two to it. One of the last questions that I'll ask, and then open it up for you all to mention anything that you may have wanted to say, but we haven't gotten a chance to ask, is some common mistakes that you saw other students make in the process, that maybe you made in the process, that you may see Dr. Speight in the process.
I would say one of the things that I noticed that students can make a mistake with is not being themselves, and also being a little too nervous. And of course, it's a nervous situation, so everybody's going to be nervous. But I think depending upon the site, and then also how you vibe with the training director and the individuals who are interviewing you, trying to make it a conversation and not an interview. And I think for majority of the interviews that I had, they felt like really thoughtful conversations. I didn't feel like I was getting grilled, except for when they were asking me forensic related questions. After that, I didn't feel like I was getting grilled. It felt very natural. And at least from my experience, they almost asked more questions about just me, who I am as a person, and not clinician related questions like, oh, what's your theoretical orientation? You know, how do you feel about X, Y, and Z? It was like, who are you? What do you do for fun? Like, you know, I talked about a multitude of things, like where I traveled throughout that year. And I talked about my family and my friends, things that were very personal to me. And I think that stood out a lot during my interviews.
Yeah, personality plays a big role. I actually had somebody to tell me that a lot of people are looking to see, like, are you somebody that I can work with? Like, can I even stand being around you for a year? Like, so be yourself is very important. Also, I told y'all I have 3 kids, but I didn't tell nobody else that I had 3 kids. They don't, none of the sites know that I have children, because I was told not to say anything that would make them not want to take you. And if you have, for some reason, if they feel like these children are going to get in the way of you doing whatever it is that you need, this is a personal decision that I made. I'm not saying that you need to make this choice, but keep in mind that you don't want to say anything in your essays or say anything in your interview that is going to make them raise an eyebrow that you're not going to be able to do the job.
I'm going to say once again, dissertation. And I say that again because I know people who didn't finish their dissertation internship. And it's great that you matched. Fantastic. Congrats. But your degree is not conferred till you finish your dissertation. And it would be, I'm not going to say a waste of time, but it'll be an interesting moment when you finish internship and then you're chilling. You're not Dr. So-and-so. You are, when you're going to get that dissertation done. And I was advised a lot, finish, so at least get to data collection at minimum to before you go off to internship. And I think that would be at a good spot. But again, like a done dissertation, you're not done with your PhD or Psy.D until you finish that dissertation. And it's great to have a great internship site, and it's fantastic. But we want to finish that first. If anything, if that should be in the forefront of your mind. And I think that makes kind of internship a little challenging sometimes, is how do you balance dissertation and internships at the same time? And to do that is to try to put a lot of weight before you go off to internship and focusing on your dissertation. And along with having a personality, I think that's really key. You know, if we're going to be emerging psychologists, they're not expecting you to be a robot. They want you to have personality. They want you to relax. They want you to come in knowing that you don't know everything. I think a lot of times applicants come in thinking that they're extra confident, and it comes across as negative. In reality, you know, sites they're trained to really focus on how to enhance your experience to take you to the next level, kind of like polish you off. I think, you know, graduate school gives you all the parts to put together. An internship is there to polish you off, to fine tune those areas that perhaps maybe you need to focus more on.
Man,
Yeah.
I'm really glad you said finish that dissertation, because ABD is not a degree.
Hmm.
Mhm.
And ABD is not a degree, and some people put it down on their business card like it is. It means you didn't get done. And what's going to happen when you're on internship is your coworker is going to be passing you by because they're going to get job interviews that you're not going to get. And they're going to be able to apply for jobs that you can't, because sites are not going to be interested in you if you're not actually a postdoc. If you're still a pre, why would they bother? So you got to get that dissertation done. But I think one of the biggest mistakes students make is not only not getting that dissertation done and making really good progress on it before they go on internship, but I think people compress the time and they really don't realize how much time and effort it takes to apply for internship. You can throw together 4 essays, you really can, in a week, and they're going to look like crap to sites in comparison to students who spent the whole summer working on their essay. It's obvious. It's 500 words, and you better use those words well. And it's a waste of your time to not invest in this application process, so that I have a timeline that I tell our students. So I think in mid-July, you should be working on your essays and your application online. Some students didn't count their hours, their whole 4 years they were in school, because you have to be able to say how many Black men in wheelchairs over 65 you saw. If you don't know that today, you have a problem. You need to, so if you're a student anticipating internship, make sure you're doing a good job of tracking your hours, because you should be working on that appy, in July. You should have done like a second draft of your essays in July. Come August, you should be on a great third draft with an excellent draft of your vita that you're able to share with your folks you're going to ask to recommend and those older peers who are going to give you good feedback. So by the beginning of September, you have really excellent paperwork. It would be a mistake to not, some people don't start their essays till September versus someone who's been working on them all summer. I don't know. And I think that, end of October, your paperwork is polishing off at this point. You've talked to your recommenders, you revised according to their feedback. So I think not giving yourself enough time to do a really excellent process is a mistake students can make.
And there are like resources for tracking those hours. I used Time to Track. It was $40 a year, and I was just able to input all my hours, including client demographics and everything, all the information that you will need to provide when you're filling out the appy. So if you can find a resource like that or create your own, I have friends that created their own Excel spreadsheet. They didn't pay anything and they were able to track their hours in that way. But it's very important, especially like I said, for sites that are looking for a certain amount of hours in each area, for you to understand where you are, where you stand with those numbers.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Does anyone, let me check the chat. Yes, Sandra, this video can be viewed after the live. It stays on YouTube. So all the webinars that we do, even though they're live, you can always go back to the ABSI YouTube page and access them and view them that way. So I'm grateful for everyone who agrees to do the webinars. It's just the wealth of knowledge that some people, like even some of the people on the webinar right now, didn't really have a chance to have something like this when they were applying. So thank you so much for agreeing to do it.
Sure.
Nobody else has any questions right now, but I also let them know to just email me if anything comes up, and I will email them the handout that we created, Dr. Speight, and then we'll just shoot you any questions that anyone might send my way, and I will send you questions because I will be applying to yeah, any last words that y'all want to share before I end it?
Don't be afraid to reach out to an older person, older student, professor who've been there. I think a lot of times it can be intimidating to share our application because it kind of shows what we've been doing throughout the years of training. But I think that's probably the best thing that we have, and especially remaining African-centered, we are a collective unit. And I think it's really important to ask older students who've been there, done that, to give you feedback, to give you words of encouragement, to just give you space to just vent. Because there are lots of schools and lots of places where students don't have space to ask older students due to the culture of their programs, where it might be more secretive or extra competitive. And that's when you must reach out to your outer network, student circle or elders or your JEGNA, whoever, just ask. You know, there have been lots of students who ask me for my materials and I instantly give it to them and don't mind sitting on the phone and talking with you. And I'm not trying to get you to do what I did, but get you to do what you want to do and how I can support you. I think sometimes we get afraid that if we ask somebody elder that they're going to try to make us recreate what they did. And it really is just about things that I wish I would have known or areas that you should possibly look out for.
That's exactly, you took the words right out of my mouth. And I have to say thank you to Dr. Vance because he helped me during my process. And looking at his materials, it was very helpful. And this is a perfect situation. We're not necessarily in the same trajectory, but looking at his materials, understanding what his thought process was during the essay writing process, that really helped me. And he, of course, encouraged me throughout the way too, and still now. But no, lean on your village. That's my takeaway. Lean on your village. Lean on the village as far as essays go, helping you to interview. As you're going through the interviews, if you can lean on the village and your tribe to help you throughout the process by staying with people, or even just words of encouragement, because that can make a really big difference. It's a very fun and exciting process, especially if you're traveling all over the country. You're getting really excited about what's next for your career and your future, but it can also be kind of emotionally draining too. So having as much support as possible is really important.
I have to thank Dr. Vance as well because he provided me with that information too. And I absolutely needed it. I did not know what was supposed to be in anything. Like, what am I putting? I have so much experience, not just educational, but life. What do I put in these letters? So they were very, very helpful. But also take advantage of whatever workshops are being offered on your campuses. We had a workshop for writing a college essay, a workshop for writing a hospital essay. And I attended everything that had to do with internship just to gain further knowledge and insight on exactly what it is that I needed to do to make myself competitive for these positions. Don't take it for granted. If things are being offered, accept them.
Yeah, and I would say, what's for you is for you. So things have a way of working out the way they're supposed to.
Absolutely.
So you can worry about it if you want, if that'll help, or you could get busy and do what you need to do. And in the end, things work. Things work out. The universe is in order. Always has been, always will be. So that's going to be true for you and your internship process too. It's going to be in order.
I agree, Dr. Suzette, because my 2 little interviews, it was the end of the world for a whole day. Mm-hmm. And the next day it was like, okay, I got 7 days. Let me kick it in gear. And I got exactly what I wanted. Right. So what is meant for you will be for you.
Absolutely.
Keep that in mind.
Yep.
That was a really good note to end on, but I had one last question, Dr. Speight, because someone said this to me about like if you're traveling during the summer or you're going to different places, when is it appropriate to reach out to training directors and just ask them casual questions?
No, they don't want to hear that. That's why they have that's why they have websites. They don't want casual questions, and you don't want to be that annoying applicant. I mean, that's just my perspective. That's how I feel as a training director when people apply to the doctoral program. Read the website before you send me an email.
Mm-hmm.
Like, is it a part-time program? That's like the third line of the website. You didn't read it. Don't ask me questions. I'm sorry. I'm tired. Don't ask me questions like that. And don't bother your training directors with questions like that. That's not what they're there for. Everything you need to, for the most part, the big questions you have are answerable from their website. And then after you get an interview, then you have better questions.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then the interns.
And then the interns. That's right.
Mhm.
But not, don't be, no casual questions. Sorry.
No problem. Thank you so much. My big takeaway is that everything is in order. Ashe.
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 All right. Good night.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.